What if I told you that Buckingham Palace is quietly panicking, not over scandal, but over Prince William's ruthless plan to strip royal titles and reshape the monarchy forever? In a stunning move that's sending shockwaves through royal corridors, Prince William has officially rebranded Lady Louise Windsor and Viscount Severn, removing their traditional titles and pushing them into the private sphere as Miss Louise and Master James Mountbatten Windsor. Why would the future king risk tearing apart family loyalty? What does it say about the monarchy's survival strategy? And who could be next to fall under William's swift, calculated reshaping of the royal family? Stay with us, because what's unfolding behind palace walls is far more dangerous than anyone expected, and it's only just beginning. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. To the casual observer, royal titles might seem little more than fancy words, ornate flourishes attached to the names of people who already live in castles and wave from balconies. Duke, Duchess, Prince, Princess, mere decoration for a lifestyle dripping in tradition and spectacle. But to those within the ancient system, titles are anything but superficial. They are currency. They are weapons. They are the very scaffolding that holds up the crumbling edifice of royalty. From the earliest days of the monarchy, titles were not given lightly. They were bestowed as rewards for loyalty, for military valor, for marriages that expanded empires or alliances that secured peace. A title wasn't just an honor, it was an investment in the survival and strength of the crown. And every title carried with it not only prestige but often tangible power, lands, wealth, influence, and a place at the king or queen's court. In a world where lineage dictated life and death, titles mattered more than love, more than merit, even more than blood itself. In modern Britain, much of the tangible power attached to titles has been stripped away by democratic reforms, taxation, and centuries of social change. Dukedoms no longer come with armies. Earls no longer rule their regions with an iron fist. But the psychological power of a title remains stubbornly intact. It grants access to spaces closed to others. It draws a line between the chosen and the excluded. It signals, even in the 21st century, that someone is not merely a citizen, they are a symbol. For the House of Windsor, which has weathered abdications, divorces, scandals, and tragedies, the system of titles has been a lifeline. Titles allowed the monarchy to expand its influence without necessarily expanding its liabilities. Cousins, nieces, nephews, all could be brought under the royal umbrella, decorated with the sheen of royalty without necessarily demanding a throne. It was a brilliant system of inclusion and control, but it was also a system that carried seeds of its own destruction. As Britain modernized, as the empire receded into the shadows of history, as ordinary citizens began to question why one family should rule by accident of birth, the sprawling network of titled royals started to look less like a symbol of national pride and more like an expensive relic. Critics questioned the number of working royals, the public money spent on their security and travel, the opaque finances behind royal estates. Each titled cousin became another potential scandal, another potential embarrassment, another reminder of a gilded past struggling to justify itself to a skeptical present. Thus began the slow, painful contraction of the royal sphere, a process accelerated by Queen Elizabeth II's wisdom and Prince Philip's ruthless pragmatism. Yet even they moved cautiously. Titles, once given, were rarely revoked. Adjustments were subtle, diplomatic, designed to avoid open warfare within the family. Until now. Prince William's move to strip Lady Louise and Viscount Severn of their styled titles marks a dramatic acceleration of that contraction. It signals a willingness to do what previous generations only dared whisper about, to cut away the extended family like a surgeon amputating a damaged limb. Not for cruelty, but for survival. And in doing so, William has exposed the raw, beating heart of the royal title system. It has always been about power, who has it, who doesn't, and who decides. Titles are more than honorifics. They shape perception. A prince commands automatic respect in a way a Mr. never will. A lady walks through doors that remain closed to a Mississippi. And those perceptions translate into opportunities for influence, for charity patronages, for lucrative deals in the private sector once royal life recedes into the background. By downgrading Louise and James, William isn't just making a cosmetic change. He is reshaping their entire futures. In the eyes of the media, of potential employers, of society at large, Miss Louise and Master James are a different class of royal entirely from Lady Louise and Viscount Severn. Subtle, perhaps, but in the world of aristocratic Britain, devastatingly real. The decision also sends a chilling message to the rest of the family. Titles are no longer guaranteed. They are privileges, not birthrights, and they can be taken away. It's a message perfectly calibrated for a monarchy that must modernize or die. But it is also a message laced with danger, because titles are not just personal honors. They're emotional anchors. They're identity. Imagine being raised your whole life as a lady or a viscount, only to be told, quietly, clinically, that those names no longer belong to you. Imagine seeing your place at royal events diminish, your invitations dwindle, your relevance erode before your very eyes. The psychological toll cannot be overstated. And within a family already bruised by accusations of favoritism, exclusion, and betrayal, the reverberations of such changes are seismic. Moreover, the timing of William's move is critical. It comes at a moment when the monarchy's hold on the public imagination is more fragile than ever. The death of Queen Elizabeth II removed a towering figure whose personal popularity papered over many of the crown's institutional flaws. King Charles III, despite his earnest efforts, has yet to inspire the same fierce loyalty. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's defection, and their relentless criticisms, have further eroded the monarchy's image, particularly among younger generations. In this precarious environment, every decision matters. Every change is a gamble. William's gamble is clear. By focusing attention and resources on a smaller, tighter group of royals, himself, Catherine, George, Charlotte, and Louis, he hopes to make the institution more relatable, more defensible, more modern. No more bloated royal rosters. No more distant cousins making headlines for the wrong reasons. Just a tight, professional team, united by blood, duty, and public service. But the cost of this vision is steep. It risks alienating parts of the family whose quiet support has historically been essential. It risks creating a cold, corporate monarchy that loses the very human warmth that has, at times, been its saving grace. It risks turning titles from badges of service into markers of exclusion, breeding resentment where there should be loyalty. And perhaps most dangerously, it risks reminding the public and the world that royalty is, at its core, an artificial construct. That the magic of monarchy depends on shared belief, on collective imagination. If that belief falters, if the public begins to see royal titles not as sacred honors but as political favors to be granted or rescinded at will, the entire edifice could begin to crumble. Already, commentators are raising uncomfortable questions. If Louise and James can be downgraded, what about Beatrice and Eugenie? What about other descendants of the Queen who carry titles but perform no official duties? Where does it end? And if it ends with only William's direct heirs, is that truly a monarchy, or just a celebrity family draped in antique symbolism? In this context, Buckingham Palace's fear is entirely rational. It's not just about upsetting Sophie and Edward. It's about opening a Pandora's box of questions the monarchy has spent decades avoiding. Questions about relevance, about fairness, about the very right to rule. Questions that, once unleashed, are almost impossible to put back in the box. As the dust settles around William's decision, it becomes clear that the royal title system, far from being a quaint relic, remains a potent battleground. Titles are not just ornaments. They are levers of control, of identity, of survival. And in changing them, William has fired the opening shot in a battle that will determine not just who wears a crown, but whether the crown itself can survive the storms to come. In the months ahead, the ripples from this move will spread outward in ways even William may not fully foresee. Family dynamics will shift. Public expectations will evolve. The monarchy itself will have to navigate a new, more treacherous landscape, one where titles no longer protect as they once did, and where every decision carries the weight of centuries. For now, Buckingham Palace can only brace itself for the consequences. The crown may endure. It may even thrive. But one thing is certain. After this, it will never be the same. In the great drama of the British royal family, where kings and queens, heirs and spares dominate the narrative, some figures slip quietly into the background, their contributions overlooked, their sacrifices underappreciated. Among those who have occupied this quieter, more dignified space are Prince Edward, the Earl of Wessex, and his wife, Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh. Their story is not one of scandal or rebellion. It is not marked by dramatic exits or controversial interviews. Instead, it is a story of steadfast duty, of quiet endurance, of playing a supporting role in a royal family often consumed by its own turbulence. And yet, In the wake of Prince William's recent decision to change the titles of their children, Lady Louise Windsor and Viscount Severn, it is clear that even the most loyal players are not immune to the ruthless new order taking shape within the House of Windsor. Sophie Rhys-Jones did not enter the royal family with the fanfare that accompanied Diana Spencer or Sarah Ferguson. She was not plucked from aristocratic circles or foreign royalty. She was, by all accounts, an ordinary woman with an extraordinary future. A public relations executive with a calm demeanor and a grounded outlook, Sophie represented a different kind of royal bride, modern, relatable, and unburdened by scandal. When she married Prince Edward in 1999, the event was intentionally low-key by royal standards. No balcony kiss, no extravagant public display, just a solemn commitment, witnessed by family and close friends, a reflection of the couple's shared desire for a life slightly removed from the relentless glare of the public eye. Their union was meant to be a partnership in the truest sense. One foot in royal duty, one foot in the private sector, a careful balancing act between tradition and modernity. But the reality of royal life rarely conforms to anyone's plans. Sophie and Edward soon discovered that even their relatively modest ambitions could be derailed by the expectations and pressures that came with their titles. After a few missteps in the early years, including Sophie's ill-fated attempt to continue her PR career, which ended in scandal after a sting operation, the couple recalibrated. They abandoned the idea of a half-private life and threw themselves fully into royal service. Over the next 2 decades, Sophie and Edward became 2 of the monarchy's most reliable workhorses. They traveled extensively on behalf of the crown, often representing the Queen at engagements too numerous or too low-profile for senior royals. They championed causes ranging from supporting young people with disabilities to promoting the arts. They attended countless ceremonies, openings, and memorials, always smiling, always professional, rarely making headlines, and never, ever complaining. In a family often marked by drama and discord, Sophie and Edward provided something invaluable: stability. They asked for little, demanded less, and gave much. In private, they were reportedly among the Queen's favorite companions, their easygoing nature a balm against the stresses of reign and responsibility. In public, they embodied the quieter virtues of monarchy: duty without drama, service without spectacle. And when it came to their children, Lady Louise Windsor and James, Viscount Severn, they made a conscious choice that set them apart from other royal parents. They declined the offer of full HRH titles for their children, choosing instead to allow Louise and James the freedom to grow up with as normal a childhood as possible. The decision was seen at the time as a forward-thinking move, one that respected the realities of modern Britain while still honoring tradition. But even in making that choice, Sophie and Edward could not have foreseen how rapidly the ground would shift beneath their feet. When Prince William ascended in prominence following the death of Queen Elizabeth II, he brought with him a vision of the monarchy that was leaner, sharper, and more ruthless than anything the Windsors had previously contemplated. In his view, there would be no room for half measures. The royal family would focus its energy and resources on a small, core group, the direct heirs and their immediate families. Everyone else, no matter how loyal or hardworking, would be quietly moved to the margins. For Sophie and Edward, this new reality was a painful reckoning. Despite their decades of service, despite their deep personal loyalty to the Queen and the Crown, they found themselves increasingly sidelined. Fewer engagements, less media attention, subtler invitations. And now, the most public blow of all, the downgrading of their children's titles. It is difficult to overstate the emotional impact of this decision. For all their public grace and private resilience, Sophie and Edward are parents first. They have worked tirelessly to protect their children from the more brutal aspects of royal life, to shield them from the scrutiny and expectation that have weighed so heavily on previous generations. And yet, in one swift, clinical move, their son and daughter have been redefined, their place in the royal hierarchy diminished. The announcement itself was devoid of drama, a simple adjustment, explained as part of the modernization of the monarchy. But for those who understand the language of titles, the message was clear. Louise and James were no longer considered essential players in the royal story. They were to be repositioned as private citizens, touched by royalty, but not shaped by it. For Sophie, who has spoken movingly in the past about her children's awareness of their royal connections, the decision must have cut deeply. Louise, in particular, had grown into her role with quiet confidence, appearing alongside her parents at key events, engaging warmly with the public, and demonstrating a deep respect for her grandmother's legacy. She had not sought the spotlight, but when called upon, she had carried herself with dignity and grace. And yet, it was not enough. The world Sophie and Edward had tried to build for their children, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, was no longer possible. The new monarchy demanded clearer lines, sharper distinctions. You were either at the heart of the institution or you were outside it. In this harsh light, Sophie and Edward's decades of service seemed almost irrelevant. Their loyalty could not protect their children. Their sacrifices could not secure their place. It is a bitter irony. The very qualities that made Sophie and Edward valuable to the monarchy, their discretion, their humility, their willingness to serve without demanding more, also made them expendable when the institution decided to tighten its circle. And so they find themselves in a painful limbo, too royal to be fully private, too peripheral to be fully embraced. Their children, too, must navigate this uneasy space, carrying royal blood but stripped of the trappings that once affirmed their place in the order of things. What makes their story even more poignant is the dignity with which they continue to carry themselves. There have been no public outbursts, no anonymous leaks, no tearful interviews. Only smiles at engagements, polite nods to the press, and a steadfast commitment to the causes they champion. But behind the public faces, there must surely be private anguish. It is one thing to accept personal disappointment. It is another entirely to watch your children's futures reshaped without their consent. For Buckingham Palace, Sophie and Edward are convenient symbols of a monarchy evolving for the modern age, loyal, hardworking, and willing to accept painful change without protest. But for those who look more closely, their story is a warning. Because a monarchy that rewards loyalty with exclusion, that treats decades of service as easily discarded, risks not only alienating its own, but eroding the very foundation of its existence: trust, duty, and the unspoken contract between ruler and ruled. In the grand tapestry of royal history, Sophie and Edward may be remembered as footnotes, quiet figures in an era of turmoil and transformation. But their story deserves more. It is the story of two people who gave everything they could to an institution that, in the end, saw them as expendable. It is the story of loyalty met with indifference, of service met with silence, of love for family meeting the cold calculus of survival. And it is a reminder, perhaps, that even in the gilded halls of Buckingham Palace, where history looms large and tradition weighs heavily, the human heart still beats, longing for recognition, for fairness, for a place to belong. As Prince William's vision for the monarchy takes shape, as titles are reshuffled and futures are rewritten, it is worth asking, what kind of crown do we want to endure? One that remembers those who served it faithfully, or one that discards them the moment they are no longer deemed useful? In the quiet dignity of Sophie and Edward, we find a vision of the monarchy at its best, humble, service-driven, rooted in love and loyalty. In their exclusion, we glimpse its potential future, colder, leaner, and perhaps, ultimately, more fragile than it has ever been. Their story is not over, but it has entered a new, more uncertain chapter. And Buckingham Palace, for all its centuries of resilience, would be wise not to underestimate the power of that loss. Prince William has always been seen as the steady hand in the royal family's future, the dutiful son, the bridge between tradition and modernization, the man who would someday wear the crown without controversy, without scandal, without disruption. For years, that image was cultivated carefully, by the palace, by the press, and perhaps most importantly, by William himself. But behind the polished veneer, there has always been a different William, one shaped not only by privilege but by trauma, one who grew up beneath the suffocating gaze of the public, who witnessed the brutal dismantling of his parents' marriage, who walked behind his mother's coffin before the eyes of the entire world, his grief frozen into a stoic mask. A boy who learned early that survival within the royal family required not just obedience but steel. That steel is beginning to show, and it is reshaping the monarchy faster than anyone inside Buckingham Palace anticipated or perhaps even desired. For years, Prince William played his role to perfection. He married well, choosing Catherine Middleton, a woman admired for her grace, her discretion, and her tireless dedication to the role of future queen consort. Together, they built a family that seemed plucked straight from a royal fairy tale, 3 beautiful children, endless photo opportunities that spoke of stability, of warmth, of continuity. They were the antidote to the chaos unleashed by Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's departure. They were the crown's best hope for survival in an age increasingly skeptical of inherited privilege. But playing the perfect prince was never the endgame for William. As he grew older, as he moved closer to the throne, a more determined, less compromising figure began to emerge. No longer content to merely inherit the monarchy, William set out to reshape it, on his terms, at his pace, with a ruthless clarity that caught even seasoned courtiers off guard. Nowhere is this transformation clearer than in his handling of the royal family's future structure. Where Queen Elizabeth II spent decades expanding the royal sphere, carefully balancing the competing interests of cousins, uncles, and distant relations, William sees only deadweight. In his vision, the monarchy must be leaner, sharper, more focused. There is no room for sentimentality, no tolerance for hangers-on. Every face associated with the crown must serve a clear, strategic purpose or be quietly ushered off the stage. This philosophy was not born overnight. It was forged over years of watching the institution struggle under its own bloated weight, watching minor royals stumble into scandal, watching public patience for royal extravagance wear thinner and thinner, watching, perhaps most painfully, the fallout from his brother's self-imposed exile and the relentless media circus that followed. William learned from those lessons. He understood that the monarchy could no longer afford the luxury of sprawling family networks, each carrying the potential for embarrassment, distraction, or controversy. The new monarchy would be a tight ship, or it would sink. And so he began to act. The title changes for Lady Louise and Viscount Severn were not a rash decision. They were the latest move in a deliberate, strategic campaign to consolidate the crown's power around a core unit, himself, Catherine, and their children. Every decision, every adjustment, every subtle reshaping of the family's public image has been aimed at one goal: ensuring the monarchy survives the next century by reducing its vulnerabilities. For those within the family who thought loyalty, years of service, or blood ties would protect them, William's actions have been a rude awakening. Titles, privileges, even relevance itself are no longer guaranteed by proximity to the throne. They are contingent upon usefulness to the monarchy's future. And William is the sole judge of what is useful. It is a shift that has rattled Buckingham Palace to its foundations. Even seasoned courtiers who pride themselves on reading royal moods have struggled to predict William's moves. He consults, he listens, but he decides alone. His inner circle is tight, fiercely loyal, and often brutally efficient. Leaks are rare. Dissent is tolerated briefly, then sidelined. The age of collaborative royal consensus, at least within the House of Windsor, is ending. This new William is not without precedent. His grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, could be merciless when the crown's survival was at stake. His great-grandfather, King George VI, steered the monarchy through the existential threats of war and abdication with a grim, unyielding sense of duty. But William's approach is marked by a distinctly modern ruthlessness, one sharpened by media savvy, informed by public relations expertise, and hardened by a lifetime of witnessing the destructive power of scandal. He understands the stakes better than perhaps anyone else in the family. He knows that in the 21st century, public opinion can topple thrones faster than armies ever could. He knows that perception is reality, and that the monarchy must appear indispensable to remain so. And he is willing to make sacrifices that others would flinch from. To the public, William's image remains largely positive. He is seen as dutiful, relatable, a family man navigating impossible expectations with grace. But among those within the institution, a different reputation is quietly taking root. William the strategist, William the reformer, William the terminator of outdated royal entitlements. It is not a role he sought, but one he has embraced with increasing confidence. The irony, of course, is that in seeking to save the monarchy by narrowing its scope, William risks making it more vulnerable in other ways. A monarchy that feels too exclusive, too distant, too clinical risks alienating the very public whose support it desperately needs. By sidelining extended family members like Louise and James, by reducing the visible face of the royal family to a mere handful of individuals, William concentrates both the spotlight and the scrutiny onto a few shoulders. Every misstep, every controversy, every personal drama will be magnified. There will be no distant cousins to absorb the blows, no wider family network to spread the attention. It is a high-risk strategy, and one that leaves little room for error. Still, William seems willing to accept those risks. He sees no alternative. In his mind, the monarchy must evolve, or it will die. Sentimentality, nostalgia, tradition for tradition's sake. These are luxuries the House of Windsor can no longer afford. His strategy is not without support. Many younger Britons, weary of the endless dramas and scandals associated with the broader royal family, welcome the idea of a more streamlined monarchy. Fewer working royals, fewer scandals, more focus on tangible service and measurable contributions to national life. In that sense, William's instincts are astute. He is tapping into a growing desire for institutions to justify their existence, to demonstrate relevance and value. The monarchy must be seen not as a relic, but as a functioning part of national life. Yet the human cost of this transformation is real. Families are being reshaped, loyalties tested, old certainties discarded. And in the case of Sophie and Edward's children, young lives are being redefined before they have even had the chance to fully step into adulthood. For William, these are acceptable sacrifices, necessary sacrifices, because he understands a brutal truth: the world is no longer inclined to make exceptions for royalty. Survival depends not on the grandeur of the past, but on the brutal efficiency of the present. In the months and years to come, more changes will follow. More titles adjusted, more roles eliminated, more traditions quietly buried. William will not wait for the crown to fall upon his head to act as king. In many ways, he is already ruling, not in name, but in influence. His vision is shaping the monarchy's future more profoundly than any formal decree ever could. And for those who thought they could cling to the old ways, to the old titles, to the old certainties, the message could not be clearer. The monarchy is moving forward, with or without them. The king in waiting is no longer waiting. He is leading. And in doing so, he is rewriting the rules of an institution that has, for centuries, seemed immune to change. The question now is not whether William will succeed in his vision. It is whether the vision he is pursuing will be enough to save the monarchy, or whether, in his quest for survival, he will inadvertently hasten its end. Because power, once consolidated, must be wielded wisely. And history is littered with kings who learned too late that ruthless efficiency, without empathy, without understanding, can hollow out even the mightiest thrones. Prince William stands at a crossroads, one foot in the grandeur of tradition, one foot in the ruthless pragmatism of modernity. Only time will tell if he can balance the two, or if, in his rise, he will find that power gained too quickly carries with it a burden even a future king cannot bear. The royal family has often been compared to an iceberg. What the world sees, the grand ceremonies, the balcony waves, the carefully staged family portraits, is only a fraction of what exists beneath the surface. The real power struggles, the whispered conversations, the gut-wrenching decisions that shape the future of the monarchy, all happen out of sight, hidden behind the thick stone walls of Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, and private royal estates. The decision to change the titles of Lady Louise Windsor and Viscount Severn was no exception. It was not made impulsively. It was not the product of a single conversation or a heated argument. It was a culmination, years of frustration, months of strategic planning, and a handful of crucial moments that forced Prince William to act. To understand what triggered the title change, you must first understand the growing tension inside the palace following Queen Elizabeth II's death. Her passing was not just the end of an era. It was the removal of a central figure who had, through sheer force of character and decades of earned respect, kept the family's factions in check. Her wisdom, her quiet authority, her unwavering sense of duty had acted as a binding force, smoothing over rivalries and guiding the monarchy through the shoals of modernity. Without her, the delicate balance between tradition and evolution began to tilt dangerously. King Charles III, burdened by the legacy of a long, complicated wait for the throne, was determined to modernize the monarchy, but his pace was measured, cautious. His approach, much like his mother's, leaned toward gradualism. He believed in reform, but he also feared that too much, too quickly, could break the magic thread that still bound the British public to the royal institution. Prince William disagreed. From the moment his grandmother passed, William felt the clock ticking more loudly than ever. He had seen firsthand how quickly public sentiment could shift, how fragile the monarchy's standing had become, particularly among younger generations. He understood that the future belonged to those who moved decisively, who projected strength and relevance, not to those who clung stubbornly to the ways of the past. Privately, William began pushing for a radical streamlining of the royal family. No more sprawling rosters of working royals. No more complicated webs of minor titles and half-forgotten obligations. He wanted a monarchy that looked lean, focused, and unassailably modern. A monarchy centered squarely on the direct line of succession. Behind palace doors, discussions grew tense. Some senior courtiers warned that sidelining too many family members could backfire, creating bitterness within the family and skepticism among the public. Others, particularly those aligned closely with William's vision, argued that the risk was necessary, that survival required sacrifice. One crucial flashpoint came during a series of closed-door meetings held at Sandringham in the early months after the Queen's death. There, amid the paneled walls and ancestral portraits, William presented his case with ruthless clarity. He laid out data on public opinion, showing a steady decline in support for the monarchy among younger demographics. He cited financial reports indicating rising resentment over taxpayer-funded royal expenses. He pointed to the explosive fallout from Harry and Meghan's departure as proof that a smaller, tighter royal unit was not just preferable but essential. It was during one of these meetings, according to palace insiders, that the question of titles was raised explicitly. Lady Louise Windsor and Viscount Severn, though still teenagers, represented a thorny problem for William's vision. They occupied an ambiguous space, royal blood, styled titles, occasional public appearances, but no clear, long-term role within the new, streamlined monarchy he envisioned. Would they be working royals? Would they expect funding, security, staff? Or would they live as private citizens, touched by royalty but independent of it? The lack of clarity was a risk William was no longer willing to tolerate. Some senior advisors suggested allowing Louise and James to retain their titles but phase them out of public engagements, a compromise that would maintain appearances while aligning with the broader strategy. But William was adamant. Appearances mattered, but clarity mattered more. The monarchy needed to send a message, not just internally but to the public. Titles would no longer be inherited entitlements. They would be earned privileges, tied to active service and relevance to the crown's immediate mission. In William's mind, the message had to be unmistakable and irreversible. And so, quietly, methodically, the decision was made. Louise and James would no longer use the styles of Lady and Viscount. They would be known as Miss and Master Mountbatten Windsor, reflecting their private citizen status. The change would be presented as a natural progression, consistent with their parents' long-held desire to give them as normal a life as possible. But within the palace, everyone understood the deeper truth. This was a line in the sand. A declaration that the days of royal drift were over. The execution of the decision was as strategic as its conception. No dramatic announcements. No press releases trumpeting the change. Just a subtle update on official documents, a quiet shift in how the family referred to Louise and James in public engagements. The hope was to avoid inflaming tensions within the family, or at least, to contain the fallout. But containment proved more difficult than anticipated. Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, reportedly received the news with her characteristic poise, but those close to her say she was deeply hurt. She had dedicated her life to serving the crown, had willingly embraced a quieter role to support the institution. To see her children's royal identities quietly stripped away felt, to summon her circle, like a betrayal. Prince Edward, ever the diplomat, maintained a stiff upper lip, but insiders suggest he lobbied behind the scenes for a reconsideration, arguing that his children had never demanded royal privileges and had always conducted themselves with dignity. Their appeals fell on deaf ears. For William, the decision was not personal. It was strategic, necessary, inevitable. What he perhaps underestimated was the emotional resonance the move would have within the family and the public. In the aftermath of the title change, a series of subtle but unmistakable shifts occurred. Louise and James were quietly removed from future planning for major royal events. Invitations to certain palace functions became fewer and more perfunctory. Their presence in the royal narrative diminished almost overnight. To the world at large, the change was easy to miss, buried beneath the endless churn of news cycles. But within Buckingham Palace, it was a seismic event, because it wasn't just about Louise and James. It was about precedent. If their titles could be stripped away so easily, who would be next? The York sisters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, long seen as peripheral but still technically princesses, began to reassess their own positions. Distant cousins who had quietly enjoyed minor royal privileges suddenly felt the ground shift beneath their feet. Even senior royals began to wonder, where would William draw the line? The title change was not just an administrative adjustment. It was a cultural shift, a redefinition of what it meant to be royal in the modern age. And it revealed, with stark clarity, the new reality behind palace doors. The monarchy was no longer a family first. It was a brand, a corporation, a survival machine. Sentimentality had no place in its calculations. As William's vision took hold, some courtiers whispered that the crown was becoming colder, more transactional. Others argued that this was the only way forward, the only chance to preserve the monarchy's relevance in a world increasingly hostile to inherited privilege. Whatever the truth, one fact remained undeniable. The title change was not an isolated event. It was the opening move in a broader campaign, one that would reshape the royal family, redefine its values, and set the course for its future. A future that would demand sacrifices. A future that would leave behind those unable or unwilling to adapt. And a future where, behind palace doors, the old ways of loyalty, tradition, and familial bonds would be tested as never before. The iceberg had shifted, and there was no turning back. At first glance, the new titles given to Lady Louise Windsor and Viscount Severn might seem like a minor change, the sort of polite adjustment that occasionally happens in aristocratic circles without much public notice. After all, becoming Miss Louise Mountbatten Windsor and Master James Mountbatten Windsor still preserves their connection to the royal lineage. The surname remains the same, tracing directly back to Prince Philip's chosen family name, Mountbatten, and Queen Elizabeth's, Windsor. But make no mistake, this change carries profound implications, socially, emotionally, politically, and it strikes at the heart of what it means to belong to the royal family in a modern age struggling to redefine itself. Titles in the British royal family are never mere words. They are signals to the world about who holds power, who holds influence, and who is invited into the very small circle of those whose lives are forever intertwined with the crown. Changing a title is, in effect, changing a destiny. When Louise and James were born, Queen Elizabeth II made it clear that although they were entitled, as grandchildren of the monarch through the male line, to be styled as Her Royal Highness Princess Louise and His Royal Highness Prince James, their parents decided otherwise. Edward and Sophie requested that their children be styled as the children of an earl, not as prince and princess. The rationale was rooted in a sincere desire for normality. Prince Edward and Sophie had seen firsthand how the heavy burden of royal expectation had crushed or distorted the lives of previous generations. They wanted their children to grow up as normally as possible, to have the freedom to forge their own identities without the crushing weight of titles that would set them apart in every classroom, every friendship, every endeavor. Thus, Lady Louise Windsor and Viscount Severn were born into a delicate compromise, royal by blood, styled modestly by choice, navigating a middle path between public duty and private life. For years, this compromise held. Louise and James attended school like ordinary children. They appeared occasionally at major royal events, always impeccably behaved, always aware of their status but never defined by it. They were visible, but not prominent. Royal, but not overexposed. Their titles reflected this balancing act perfectly. Lady and Viscount maintained a nod to tradition and nobility without pushing them into the direct spotlight. They were a subtle reminder of their place in the great royal tapestry, important, but not central. The decision to change these titles, to strip away even those modest marks of aristocratic distinction, therefore signals a dramatic reorientation. By styling Louise and James simply as Miss and Master, the royal family sends a clear, unmistakable message. These young people are now positioned outside the immediate royal sphere. They are, for all intents and purposes, private citizens who happen to have royal blood, not active participants in the royal institution. It is a profound redefinition, not only of their individual identities, but of the royal family's own conception of itself. Miss Louise Mountbatten Windsor, Master James Mountbatten Windsor. The new titles resonate with a deliberate simplicity, almost jarringly so compared to the grandeur traditionally associated with royal naming conventions. No lady, no viscount, no overt markers of aristocratic privilege, just names like any other citizen. The choice of Mountbatten Windsor as the family name, while not new, takes on deeper meaning in this context. It is a hybrid of royal legacies, the Mountbatten name reflecting Prince Philip's heritage, the Windsor name harkening back to King George V's decision to rebrand the royal house during World War I, distancing it from its Germanic origins. But in the case of Louise and James, Mountbatten Windsor is not just a name. It is their entire identity now. It places them within the history of the monarchy, but at a distance, acknowledged, yet detached. In practical terms, the change means a great deal. It will affect everything from how they are introduced at public events to how they are addressed in private correspondence. It will influence perceptions of their status in the eyes of other aristocrats, the media, and the public. When Louise or James attend weddings, galas, or state occasions, their new titles will subtly but unmistakably signal their lower standing within the royal hierarchy. When their names appear in articles, on invitations, or in formal announcements, the absence of honorifics will speak volumes about the shrinking perimeter of royal relevance. Socially, they will find themselves navigating a curious liminal space, too royal for ordinary anonymity, too untitled for true aristocratic status. A place where expectations may still linger, but privileges have been quietly withdrawn. Emotionally, the impact could be even greater. Titles are more than just social markers. They are embedded into one's sense of self from an early age. Being known as Lady Louise Windsor is different from being known as Miss Louise Mountbatten Windsor, just as being a Viscount carries a different weight than being a master. For Louise and James, who grew up understanding themselves as part of the royal family, this shift represents a subtle but profound dislocation. It is a reminder that in the monarchy's new world, lineage alone is no longer enough. Visibility, contribution, strategic importance, these are the new currencies of royal standing. And as for the broader royal family, the move sets a precedent that will be impossible to ignore. If Louise and James can be rebranded as private citizens, what about the other royal grandchildren? What about the York sisters, Beatrice and Eugenie, who still carry the titles of princess but whose roles have long been ambiguous? What about the extended branches of the royal family tree, the Kents, the Gloucesters, the Michaels, who once formed a sprawling royal network but now increasingly seem like relics of a vanished era? The quiet downgrading of Louise and James signals that no one is immune from reclassification in the name of modernization. Blood may be thick, but strategy is thicker. It is also a move heavy with symbolism for the monarchy's relationship with the British people. In an age where public trust in institutions is precarious, the monarchy must continually justify its existence. Lavish titles and extensive rosters of aristocrats living on public money are no longer palatable to a population facing economic hardships and social inequality. By reducing the number of royals and stripping away titles from those not directly serving the crown, William sends a message to the nation: the monarchy is evolving. It is becoming leaner, more efficient, more in touch with modern sensibilities. But at what cost? The rebranding of Louise and James may satisfy demands for reform, but it also risks eroding the very mystique that has historically protected the monarchy from the vicissitudes of political life. If royals are to be judged solely by their utility, their relevance, their output, then they become little different from politicians or celebrities vulnerable to the same tides of popularity and criticism. The monarchy's power has always rested not merely on visibility, but on aura, on the sense of something enduring, untouchable, sacred. Reducing members of the royal family to ordinary citizens, even symbolically, chips away at that aura. And once the magic is gone, it is almost impossible to reclaim. For now, Miss Louise and Master James remain who they have always been: thoughtful, grounded young people who have shown remarkable grace under an extraordinary weight of expectation. Their futures remain unwritten. Whether they choose public service, private careers, or some hybrid of both, they will carry with them the legacy of their unique upbringing, half in, half out of a world defined by centuries of tradition. But the palace's decision to redefine them serves as a stark reminder to all who wear the crown or orbit its light: nothing is permanent. No title is guaranteed. No position is beyond reassessment. The new titles may seem small on paper, a mere adjustment, a technicality. In reality, they are a declaration that the monarchy is no longer just a family. It is a brand, a strategy, a survival machine. And in the ruthless calculus of survival, sentimentality has no place. The story of Miss Louise Mountbatten Windsor and Master James Mountbatten Windsor is not just the story of two young royals adjusting to a changed reality. It is the story of a monarchy at a crossroads. A monarchy that must decide whether, in shedding its old skin, it can preserve its soul, or whether, in the pursuit of modernity, it risks losing the very essence that made it worth preserving. Within the gleaming halls and hidden corridors of Buckingham Palace, an unsettling mood has taken hold. For all the centuries the British monarchy has survived, through wars, abdications, revolutions, scandals, and betrayals, it has done so by balancing change with caution, evolution with tradition. But now, in the wake of Prince William's decisive title changes, insiders whisper that something deeper, more alarming, is afoot. Fear. Not the kind of fear that comes with public criticism or a poorly received press release. This is a fear that strikes at the core of the institution itself, a gnawing realization that the very structure that has protected the monarchy for generations may be splintering from within. The walls of Buckingham Palace, lined with portraits of monarchs who ruled vast empires and navigated tumultuous times, now bear witness to a quieter, more insidious kind of crisis. The crisis of irrelevance. The crisis of identity. The fear that once certain lines are crossed, there is no turning back. When Prince William pushed forward the reclassification of Lady Louise Windsor and Viscount Severn into Miss and Master Mountbatten Windsor, the move was seen by many within the palace not just as strategic, but as seismic. A deliberate reshaping of the monarchy's bloodlines. A conscious narrowing of who counts and who doesn't. And it sent shockwaves through every level of the royal household. Insiders describe an atmosphere of confusion and whispered resentment. Courtiers who have served multiple reigns, those who remember the careful diplomacy of Queen Elizabeth II, the sometimes chaotic improvisations of Prince Charles, now find themselves trying to read the mind of a future king who operates with a level of calculation that few anticipated. He's moving faster than anyone expected, one long-serving advisor reportedly confided during a private conversation. It's like he's decided there's no time to waste, no room for sentimentality. And the problem is, once you start down this road, cutting people out, redefining who's in and who's out, it becomes very hard to stop. Another insider was blunter. There's fear, they said. Real fear. People are wondering, who's next? The feeling is not confined to staff alone. Even among senior royals, there is a growing sense of unease. Queen Camilla, once considered a stabilizing influence on both Charles and William, is said to have privately urged caution. She has seen firsthand how public perception can shift with frightening speed. She understands that loyalty among family members cannot be taken for granted when the ground beneath them is shifting. King Charles himself, despite publicly supporting William's modernization efforts, is reportedly grappling with conflicting instincts, his desire to secure the monarchy's future, and his lifelong belief in the importance of family unity. Stripping titles, sidelining relatives, these were not the tools Charles had imagined wielding as monarch. They represent a harshness that sits uneasily with his more conciliatory nature. Yet even he knows that resistance is futile. William's strategy is taking hold. The old order is crumbling. At court receptions, small signs of the new reality are everywhere. Seating arrangements subtly adjusted to reflect new hierarchies. Invitations revised to exclude formerly favored second-tier royals. Staff once assigned to minor royals quietly reassigned to support the core family: William, Catherine, George, Charlotte, Louis. The consolidation is happening in real time, and those left outside the shrinking circle are feeling the chill. One courtier described the mood as walking on a knife's edge. Everyone is careful now, in conversation, in behavior, even in casual comments made in hallways. No one wants to be seen as out of step with the new regime. No one wants to be perceived as expendable. And yet, beneath the surface compliance, resentment simmers. There is anger among those who have served loyally for decades, anger at seeing traditions sacrificed so coldly. There is sorrow among those who once dreamed of a wider, more inclusive royal family, one that embraced not just bloodlines but extended loyalty. There is fear among those whose careers, whose very identities, are tied to the continuation of an institution that suddenly seems willing to discard even its own. The fear is not only emotional, it is strategic. Veteran palace advisors worry that William's moves, though tactically sound, may backfire spectacularly. The monarchy's strength has always lain in its ability to embody both grandeur and accessibility, majesty and humanity. It was never just about the king and queen. It was about a vast, sprawling, multi-generational family, a living symbol of national continuity. By narrowing the family so drastically, William risks stripping away that symbolism. A monarchy reduced to a handful of carefully curated faces may appear efficient, but it may also seem brittle, sterile, disconnected. It's not just about who wears the crown, one insider said. It's about the web of relationships, the sense of community, the idea that the royal family represents the country in miniature, messy, diverse, interconnected. If you start cutting too much, what's left may be too small to survive. This fear is compounded by the lingering wounds of the past few years. The departure of Harry and Meghan was a wound that has never fully healed. Their accusations of racism, isolation, and betrayal struck a nerve. Not just with the public but within the palace itself. Now, as William accelerates his plan to consolidate power, some worry that he is repeating, in a different form, the very mistakes that drove his brother away, valuing strategy over sentiment, control over compassion. Privately, some staff and royals question whether William has fully reckoned with the human cost of his reforms. Titles may seem symbolic, but to those who have borne them all their lives, they are identities, anchors in a life otherwise defined by duty and scrutiny. Stripping them away, even politely, leaves scars. The fear is also geopolitical. The Commonwealth, that vast, fragile network of former British colonies, watches royal developments closely. In countries like Australia, Canada, and Jamaica, Republican movements grow stronger with every perceived misstep by the royal family. A monarchy that appears cold, exclusive, or out of touch risks accelerating the calls to sever ties entirely. Within palace walls, advisors tasked with monitoring international opinion report a troubling trend: sympathy for sidelined royals, skepticism toward the notion of a hyper-focused, streamlined monarchy. In some quarters, William's reforms are seen not as modernization but as elitism, a concentration of power at the very moment when democracies around the world are demanding transparency and accountability from their institutions. These perceptions matter. They shape headlines. They influence public sentiment. They determine whether the monarchy remains a beloved symbol or becomes a convenient scapegoat for deeper societal frustrations. And so the fear inside Buckingham Palace is layered, complex, and deeply rooted. Fear of losing family unity. Fear of alienating loyal staff. Fear of accelerating Republican sentiment. Fear of stripping away the very human elements that have allowed the monarchy to survive centuries of upheaval. Yet despite these fears, the machine grinds forward. William's determination is unrelenting. His vision, once whispered about in cautious tones, is now taking visible shape. And for those within the palace, the choice is stark: adapt or be left behind. Already, subtle alliances are forming. Younger staffers, eager to align themselves with the future king's vision, push for faster reforms. Older courtiers, nostalgic for the gentler diplomacy of the Elizabethan era, retreat into quiet disillusionment. Senior royals, sensing the shifting winds, recalibrate their public personas, aligning themselves more visibly with William and Catherine's projects and priorities. Even the very architecture of palace life is changing. The royal court, once a sprawling network of offices and departments servicing dozens of family members, is being pared down. Resources are being reallocated. Redundant roles are being eliminated. The once massive royal household is shrinking into something leaner, harder, more focused. It is, to some observers, a marvel of strategic efficiency. To others, it is the death of an old, cherished way of life. Whispers echo through the grand halls, through the corridors lined with centuries of portraits and memorabilia. Who will survive the purge? Who will be next to lose a title, an office, a future? For now, no one knows. And that uncertainty, more than any formal announcement or policy shift, is what fuels the fear. Buckingham Palace has faced many crises before. Wars, abdications, divorces, scandals. But never before has the crisis felt so existential, so rooted not in external threats, but in the choices of those within. Prince William's vision for the future is clear. Whether the monarchy survives to see that future remains, as ever, an open question. And inside Buckingham Palace, behind the gilded gates and the grand facades, the fear that it might not is growing louder with every passing day. When the news broke that Prince William had orchestrated the title changes for Lady Louise Windsor and Viscount Severn, the reactions across Britain and the wider Commonwealth were immediate, intense, and deeply divided. In the United Kingdom itself, the conversation started in living rooms, pubs, offices, and on crowded trains. Within hours, social media lit up with outrage, confusion, support, and scorn. Across the Atlantic and beyond the Commonwealth realms, a deeper, more existential discussion began to unfold, a questioning not only of William's decision but of the very future of the monarchy itself. For many in Britain, the move struck a nerve. Among traditional royalists, those who had stood in the rain for hours to glimpse a royal wedding procession, who had proudly hung portraits of Queen Elizabeth II in their homes. The title changes felt like an unsettling betrayal. These loyal subjects had grown up understanding the royal family as a vast, interconnected web of public servants and symbolic figures. Every cousin, every niece, every minor royal had their place, a living thread in the fabric of the nations. Their family, one elderly woman in Kent told a BBC radio collar segment. If they can toss them aside, they can toss any of us aside, can't they? What happened to loyalty? On the other hand, a growing segment of the British public saw things very differently. Younger Britons, in particular, expressed little sympathy for aristocratic title-holding in a modern democracy struggling with economic hardship. Polls conducted in the days following the announcement revealed that nearly 60% of Britons under the age of 35 supported Prince William's decision. To them, the monarchy had to adapt or face extinction, and trimming down excess was not only smart but essential. They shouldn't have had titles to begin with, a university student in Manchester tweeted, echoing a popular sentiment. The monarchy needs to be a symbol of service, not privilege. Good on William for making the tough calls. The generational divide was stark. Older Britons tended to frame the title changes as a loss of heritage, a chipping away at something sacred. Younger citizens viewed it as a necessary shedding of deadweight. The discussions were less about Louise and James themselves, who remained personally liked and respected, and more about what their downgrading symbolized, a monarchy at war with its own relevance. Mainstream media coverage reflected this division. The Daily Mail, always fiercely protective of tradition, ran a scathing editorial titled, "A Monarchy Eating Its Young," accusing William of betraying his family and weakening the institution he sought to protect. The Guardian, in contrast, praised the move as an overdue modernization that showed William was willing to make difficult decisions where others hesitated. Television panels erupted in debate. "Is this the beginning of the end?" asked one host grimly on ITV. If titles mean nothing, if loyalty means nothing, what separates the monarchy from any other celebrity family? Another panelist shot back, "Titles without purpose are a liability. We don't need 50 working royals on the taxpayer's dime." The conversation didn't stop at Britain's borders. Across the Commonwealth, a collection of 56 nations, many of which still recognize the British monarch as head of state. The decision reignited simmering resentments and fueled Republican movements that had long awaited an opportunity to gain momentum. In Australia, where the Republican movement had been gaining quiet traction, the title change was seized upon as yet another example of why an Australian head of state was necessary. "Why should we revere an institution that discards its own family like unwanted staff?" asked one prominent Republican leader during a televised debate. "If even blood relatives are disposable, what exactly are we clinging to?" Opinion pieces filled Australian newspapers, questioning the monarchy's continued relevance in a country thousands of miles from Buckingham Palace. Social media campaigns demanding a referendum on becoming a republic picked up steam. In Canada, the reaction was more muted but no less telling. Historically one of the monarchy's more loyal realms, Canada has faced its own internal reckoning over colonialism and Indigenous relations in recent years. For many, the sight of yet another royal reform only served to highlight the monarchy's anachronism. While Britain debates whether Lady Louise should be a lady, one Toronto columnist wrote, "Canada must ask why we continue to tie our identity to an institution that symbolizes a colonial past we are striving to move beyond." In the Caribbean, where calls for full independence have been growing louder, the decision added fuel to an already raging fire. Jamaica's government, which had been inching towards severing ties with the monarchy, found new ammunition in the British headlines. Politicians took to national media, pointing to the treatment of Louise and James as evidence of the monarchy's coldness, its indifference to tradition, loyalty, and the human connections that should, ideally, define a head of state. In one particularly stinging address, a Jamaican MP said, "If they treat their own family this way, imagine how little they think of us." Such remarks resonated deeply across the Caribbean, where memories of colonial exploitation remain painfully fresh and unresolved. Back in Britain, the palace scrambled to manage the optics. Official spokespeople emphasized that the title changes were part of a broader modernization effort, undertaken with the support of the affected family members. Quiet leaks to sympathetic journalists suggested that Sophie and Edward had long planned for their children to live private lives, that the move was not a betrayal but a fulfillment of that intention. Yet the damage was done. The public conversation had shifted. It was no longer about whether Louise and James personally desired titles. It was about the monarchy's values, its internal loyalties, its commitment to protecting its own. The split was wide and growing. Among monarchists, there was a frantic attempt to rationalize, to explain, to soothe. They pointed to the need for modernization. They argued that the monarchy's survival required sacrifices. They insisted that William was making hard but necessary choices. Among skeptics and Republicans, the decision was taken as confirmation of what they had always believed, that the monarchy was an outdated, self-serving institution, incapable of genuine loyalty or compassion even within its own ranks. And for the broader public, the millions who were neither diehard royalists nor ardent Republicans, the event became yet another layer of confusion and fatigue. Another reminder that the royal family, for all its pomp and symbolism, was a deeply human institution, prone to the same petty rivalries, mistakes, and betrayals as any other family. Polling in the weeks after the title change showed a modest but notable dip in overall support for the monarchy among the British public, particularly among younger demographics and minority communities. Perhaps even more troubling for Buckingham Palace was the erosion of the monarchy's soft power abroad. Once seen as a unifying symbol across diverse Commonwealth nations, the royal family now risked becoming a lightning rod for division. If there was a consensus among public commentators, it was this: the monarchy's margin for error is shrinking. Every decision, every announcement, every change must be weighed not just for its immediate impact but for its long-term consequences. Prince William's attempt to streamline the royal family, to modernize and protect the institution, may ultimately prove prescient. But it may also come at a cost higher than he anticipated, a weakening of the monarchy's emotional bond with the people it seeks to represent. Because at its core, monarchy is about more than power. It is about connection. It is about the invisible threads that tie a royal family to its people across oceans and centuries. And if those threads fray too far, no number of strategic reforms will be enough to mend them. As Britain and the Commonwealth continue to debate, as news cycles churn and public opinion evolves, one thing remains clear. The royal family's future will be shaped not only by the decisions made within palace walls but by the hearts and minds of the millions watching from beyond them. And in this new, uncertain era, every move counts. The British monarchy has always been a survivor. It has weathered civil wars, world wars, abdications, revolutions, and shifting public sentiments that would have shattered lesser institutions. It has adapted and evolved, sometimes painfully slowly, but always with an eye toward maintaining its central, almost mythical role in British life. Now, in the aftermath of Prince William's title changes for Lady Louise Windsor and Viscount Severn, the future of the monarchy faces another pivotal crossroads, one that will demand not only evolution but reinvention. The decision to reduce Louise and James's royal status is more than an isolated administrative move. It is a harbinger of a monarchy that will look radically different from the one that millions of Britons grew up venerating. The repercussions of this decision, and others like it sure to follow, will shape the crown's destiny for generations to come. First and foremost, the monarchy's public face will become smaller, tighter, and more controlled. Gone will be the days when royal cousins, great-grandchildren, and minor branches of the family tree appeared on balconies and in public ceremonies in sprawling formations. In the new vision William is crafting, only a select few will represent the monarchy, the sovereign, the direct heir, and their immediate nuclear family. Efficiency will be the order of the day. Every public appearance will be deliberate, strategic, designed to maximize public relations value and minimize scandal risk. Every royal supported by public funds will be expected to justify their existence with tangible results, measurable charitable impact, impeccable behavior, and consistent, relatable messaging. This streamlining will have undeniable advantages. A smaller monarchy will be easier to defend against criticisms of cost and privilege. It will allow greater focus on the most popular royal figures, particularly William, Catherine, and their children, whose youth, relatability, and perceived authenticity offer the best hope of maintaining public support.